Welcome to Page One, the show for writers with the reader in mind. Here's your host, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Page One. I'm Zita Christian. Tonight's guest first came on the show about 5 years ago. He had just retired from 35 years of teaching, and he had written a book of poetry about that career. He's back with us tonight because he's written another book about another aspect of his career. My guest is Charles Margolis, and he is a coach for beauty pageant contestants. And his book, Did I Really Say That?, gives an inside look into a world that many of us would consider foreign. But I am telling everybody now, Charlie, because I'm loving this book, this is a book for everyone, especially writers. So Charlie, thanks very much for coming back and being on the show again.
I'm delighted to be back again, and thank you for having me, Zita.
You're welcome. Now, the cover of the book and my introduction, I know is going to give the impression to people in the audience that you coach beauty pageant contestants, and you do. I mean, that's what the book is about. But your firm, Interview Image Associates. Interview Image Associates provides coaching for other people too. So give me an example. Who else?
Right. Well, politicians, people who are, like politicians, are seeking any sort of office, people who are looking to change jobs and have to go to job interviews, college students who have college interviews, which even though they're optional sometimes now, we recommend them if you think you're going to do well. And anyone else who is in a position where they're going to have to deal with the public to speak, make a presentation. We help these people with their image, their presentation, and to feel positive and good about themselves so they'll come across in the best way.
You know, that reminds me of something I heard years and years ago, I assume it's still true, about the fear of speaking in public being, I don't know, number one or number two or something on the stress scale. So I can see why a person who would need to do that, would need to speak and is not comfortable with it, that would be stressful, and I can see why they would need coaching. But I never thought of it that way until I was reading in your book about how not just being in a pageant, but going for a job interview. Obviously, that's
same
important.
Principles. Yeah, the same principles apply across the board.
So it's all about image enhancement, or
it's all about how you make your audience feel. If they feel, look, if you're a politician and people feel that you're open and you're honest, you're trustworthy, you are in charge, and you can do the job, they're going to feel good about you. They're going to feel secure. And the opposite, of course, is true. If you have a sense, the other day when I was coaching a contestant in a Mrs. contest, I said to her, remember when you were first dating your husband and you looked at this guy and you thought, you know, he's really comfortable in his skin. And that made you feel good that it was not affectations, that you were seeing someone who was genuine.
Yes.
She said, yeah, absolutely, you're right.
Yeah, it is a big difference. Tell me about how you got involved in the whole world of pageants. That is such an unusual world.
It is, and the annotated story is kind of funny. One cold, blustery March day, I was sitting home in the morning, and I got a call from a high school friend whose brother-in-law was on the Miss Connecticut board, and they were holding a local pageant, and one of the judges wasn't able to come. So he said, would you judge this pageant today? I said, how long? He said, well, all day and into the afternoon. I said, no, I'm a teacher. These days off are like gold to me. But he bribed me with food, which always works.
Okay, I'll take note.
Absolutely. So I went to my first pageant, and I noted the interview, and I remember it very well still, 20 years ago. The young women were attractive, erudite, highly educated. The schools that they came from were very impressive. But their interview answers were strained and sort of what I call pageant answers, what you would expect, mini speeches that sounded very programmed. And I thought to myself, you know, I can really teach these young ladies how to express themselves better. Coincidentally, I was taking a course in critical thinking.
Perfect.
I ended up being manager of one of the women in Miss Connecticut that year, and from there I just continued. And it's been 20 years of studying, absolutely learning. Every time that I see a program, I learn something new, because I'm always thinking, what are you seeing? What's different? What is making you feel the way you feel? And now I've codified a lot of that in my book.
And we are going to get into a lot of detail about that, because it's a treasure trove for sure. But I want to tack on to something you said just a moment ago about the answers being predictable. I remember, I mean, I think it's pretty common, unfortunately, that there are certain jokes that are made about people who are in beauty pageants, that the interview question is always something about what do you want, or what would you do if you had a wish, and it was always bring peace to the world.
World peace.
Well, who wouldn't want world peace? I mean, well, unless you build arms or something, but for the most part, of course, we all want world peace. So is that what you're talking about when you said that the answers were kind of predictable, or
predictable, lacking depth, and not demonstrative? I'm always interested when I work with somebody, tell me what you do, not what you expect to do 10 years from now.
Good point.
Show it. I mean, and the world peace thing is ubiquitous. In fact, this morning, a receptionist at a desk, when she learned what I do, she said, "Oh yeah, do you tell them how to say world peace?" And I have seen major pageants recently where the answers that were given on stage, some of them, of course, were patently wrong, inaccurate, but they still had a great presentation. And unfortunately, or for better or worse, presentation does a lot to convince people, even if the information is inaccurate. I.e., we can see a lot of that with politicians who use half-truths and pieces of things that they say, which to me becomes unethical. And teaching ethics is an important part of what I do. And somebody asked me, well, what do you tell a young lady when they're faced with this question that may be difficult to answer?
Yes.
And I say, never lie. That's my bottom line. Do not tell a lie, because then you're in another territory where you should not be.
And you want to be yourself in every way.
Absolutely.
In every way. Do you remember, I guess I'm trying to think, that was back in 2007 when you were on the show the first time, and you were reading from your book of poetry. There was a particular poem, Mad Bluebirds, that I loved, and I was looking at that before the show today, and one of the things you said was, sometimes failure is the best teacher. So tell me how you think that idea would apply in a beauty pageant, or let's say anybody in an interview process, whether it's for a beauty pageant or a job interview or a politician. I mean, we are, the airwaves are full now of people in the either now in or about to enter the presidential campaign. What is that idea of how failure can be a good teacher?
The first thing I tell the young women, or not young women, the misses also, is that you don't learn anything from winning. You learn absolutely nothing from winning. And this is verified. I refer, as you know in my book, a lot to research. What happens when we see, that's why schools are making some mistakes when they try to ensure that kids are always feeling good, that kids always do well, and they're always supported. Because you learn from making mistakes and failing. And what happens is the brain has to rewire. And that's exactly what it does. It doesn't do anything when you succeed. So if you learn that failure, and I learned this from writing, and particularly in poetry. I just finished a poem called The Trouble with Obsession, which I obsessed over for literally 4 months.
Yes.
And I knew it would happen eventually. I just didn't know when, or if I'd live long enough to see it happen. And I don't look at things, and I was telling a contestant this last Thursday, I don't look at things as failure. I just look at, it's like Edison's light bulb. He experimented 10,000 times. All right. None of those was a waste. Each one gave him information about what didn't work, therefore allowed him to move to the next step.
Yes.
So failure is very important, and if you don't go into the territory where it's a possibility, then you never get better. And research has shown one of the key components to aging gracefully and remaining active is to push yourself beyond your limits, but not so far that you can't succeed, but far enough so that it causes you some stress and some stretching to reach that point.
I relate to that one on a personal basis, Charlie. I do. I want to talk about the fact that I know recently you were named the Poet Laureate of South Windsor. So number one, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really nice. And I remember when I read that, I thought, well, of course. I mean, writing is who you are. That's, I mean, yes, you have this image business, but you are a writer, and even the focus in your consulting business is all about having people tell a story. That's so important. But that's why I wasn't surprised when the preface in your book does have this quote from the late Don Hewitt, the producer and creator of the show 60 Minutes. Let me make sure I get this correct. He said, "Learn how to tell them a story and you'll be a success." So how does that philosophy work in the world of beauty pageants?
I had a young woman who was contending for Miss Connecticut. She was dynamite in 4 areas except interview, where she was near the bottom of the pack. And I think I must have had hair when I started, but when I finished, I didn't have any more. And she would just put her head down and give up, be unable to answer the question. So I racked my brain in how to relate to her. And I finally came up with what became, and I describe in my book, as the confluent method. Now, going back to your first statement about world peace, all right, that is just a it's a default answer. You know, what's your favorite food? And somebody says, oh, pizza. That's default. There's nothing descriptive in it. There's nothing interested. And then you have a reflexive answer, which goes a little further. Oh, I like my pizza with anchovies and pineapple. Little better picture, still nothing. And then you have what I call the confluent answer, which is that very thing. It's telling a story. So I figured, what is she the expert on? The one thing where she can't be wrong? Herself. And what do the judges want to know about? They don't want to know about anything they can read in Time magazine. They want to know, they got 10 minutes to know this person. And how you do it is by telling your story. And once again, going back to what you asked me about across-the-board image consultation and teaching people to speak, it is by telling story. The brain is wired for narratives.
Yes.
Is absolutely. And not only are they informative, they're interesting. They keep you going. Just like my telling a little story about how I got into pageants, instead of saying I happened to like it and I got into it. Nothing there.
Right.
So I taught her to tell her story with everything she did, to attach a little anecdote about her life. And she won interview that year.
Awesome. And a good lesson for all of us. In your book, Charlie, you say that learning how to interview well, it's a good example, will be among their most valuable life skills, talking about the pageant contestants. And in that particular paragraph, you were referring to the contestants, but obviously the advice holds true for everybody. And as you say, it provides a way of living that is confident, bold, and satisfying. So I read this in context of your whole book, and I'm thinking you have quite an approach that you've developed, quite a coaching approach. Is it original?
Yeah, it's definitely original. There's no question about it. There are a lot of, when I was writing, I would go on Amazon and see what was out there. Not to read it, I don't work that way. In fact, I work just the opposite. I stay in a vacuum because I want to have my original thoughts. And that is very important to me as an individual. There are a lot of good public speakers out there. There are a lot of good teachers of public speaking. Many former title holders, Miss Americas and such, have written good books about interview. But my book is really very unique in its approach, and all the narratives that we were just talking about are little stories. Every chapter is a mini story about something that actually happened with someone that we can learn from. So if we broaden that to include everybody, it happens to enhance us in two ways. First, when we move out of our comfort zone and we have to speak publicly or do an interview, it's going to make us nervous, it's going to make us prepare, and it's going to expand our envelope a little bit because we're going to try something new. And that's a good thing because we get better. All of us at one time or another have to apply for a job or make a presentation or do something which requires us to move into that zone. So I think that interview is very, very important. And yeah, it's really stressful too. If you're in a pageant, when people kind of disparage pageants, I just say, when was the last time you got up on a stage in front of 400 people, had to answer a question that you hadn't heard before? Good luck with that.
Very true.
I think I said in the book, Jerry Seinfeld in one of his routines says that according to statistics, most people would rather die than give a speech.
Yes.
That says a great deal.
It does.
It's a very difficult thing. And I really honor these women for putting in the work and the effort and having the courage. And that's also one of the things I say to you. You have the courage to try to participate. Doesn't matter if you win or lose, life is not going to change. You're going to change, though. And that's the feedback that I get continually from them, which makes me feel good.
There is such pleasure in being in the game.
Right.
Whether it's participating, competing in a pageant, or submitting a manuscript. And you know, as a writer, I'm a writer, you're going to get rejections. That's just part of the process. But it takes something gutsy to put your work out there, or to stand up, as you said, in front of a panel of judges and say, bring it on.
Well, the research says that writers are the happiest while they're working toward the last third of their project. And once it's done, they have a letdown, and they kind of...
Yes.
And we all know that. You're kind of floating in space, not knowing where to go. But it's great when you're in the process. And it is the journey that matters, not the arrival.
Yeah, it really is. You were talking about statistics, and I wanted to bring up another one, a quote that you had in your book. You have a lot of great quotes in that book. You said, "It has been observed that great athletes spend up to 80% of their practice time practicing the weakest part of their game." The weakest part.
True? Yeah, it's true. It is true. The Larry Birds, if you remember, who was a great basketball player, he would get in the corner and just shoot and shoot and shoot. It's really quite true. And in terms of pageants, it's very interesting. A lot of directors will send their contestants to voice coaches or dancer instructors. They'll spend hours and hours in the gym, and they'll search for the best gown and spend huge amounts of money on it, and not do the proper interview preparation, or just do a couple of mock interviews. Now, I'm a teacher, and that was part of my getting into this too. So I think it's really important. It goes back to what you're saying about quote failure, which isn't failure at all, and getting feedback and instruction. So what my book does is give you instruction, right, on how to get better. Not if you just do mock interview after mock interview, you'll get more comfortable, but you won't get better because you don't have instruction. So if you're a football team and you're out there and you're practicing, you need your coaches to show you what to do and how to do it better. That's my job. Make sense?
And you do it well, absolutely. In fact,
love it.
In fact, you've had a lot of success.
I have had a great deal of success.
Contestants,
and not because of me, because of them.
Well, I think it's a partnership. I think it's like a good coach.
It's
in a basketball game. You have a star player, but the player is following instructions from the coach, and sometimes that just serves to open that channel so that the talent has a way to express.
And I would rather be the coach than a player personally, and I love that. That makes me so happy to see someone I've worked with excel and feel good, and see their parents or their mothers or their husbands in the audience cheering for them. That is where it is for me.
That's a good place. Another quote I want to pull from your book. Oh, and if you're just joining us, I'm talking with Charlie Margolis, and he has a new book out, and it's called "Did I Really Say That?" And it's all about your world in the coaching world of beauty pageants. So another quote, and this was the one where when I was reading your book, I had my own personal aha moment. This was from Roger Van Ock, an author, an inventor, and a creativity consultant. And he said, "Everyone has a risk muscle. You keep it in shape by trying new things. If you don't, it atrophies. Make a point of using it at least once a day." So, Charlie, what have you been using your own risk muscle on lately?
I'll tell you yours if you tell me mine.
All right, okay.
When I coach somebody, I take a risk, a personal emotional risk, because I know that we'll have a wonderful time initially. They'll be very happy. We'll have a good session, and then we'll have a bad session. Because that's where the learning is happening. That's where the criticism, that's where I make mistakes too, like everybody else. And that leaves me upset until I can fix it. And that's a risk for me. When I write, when I publish, when I stand up and read a poem, it's all a risk for me. Mm-hmm. And I do exercise that muscle regularly. But we as human beings tend to habituate. We immediately fall into habits. And if you don't believe me, just try to brush your teeth with the opposite hand tonight, or wear your watch on the other arm, and it'll drive you out of your mind, because we habituate. So in order to break those habitual patterns, and particularly patterns of thinking and reframing things, we have to work very hard and be mindful and be in the moment. Another interview was asking me how I teach people to deal with their nerves, which has to do with public speaking. And one of the things that I do that harkens back to what I said in 2007 about my learning to write poetry because this wonderful woman listened to my poetry, I teach the women to listen to the question, which means their mind will be empty instead of having that chatter that goes on because you begin answering before the question is done.
Yes.
And if you spend that moment listening, your fight or flight calms down. And then you can take a breath and you're ready to answer, and the answer just flows into you and it becomes conversational.
It does. Thank you.
So what was your aha moment?
Well, my aha moment, and this may come as some surprise to the people in the audience because I have a television show, but I'm actually a very private person. And I decided just a couple days ago to actually activate the ZitaChristian.com name, which I have had for a long time. I've done nothing. I've been working for the last several days on building a website. That's a big risk for me. It means a lot. It means a lot that I have guarded because of my own privacy issues. I'm now putting it out there.
I'm like you. I'm exactly like you. I'm private.
And it's a risk.
And it's a risk, and you have to give up control. It's also about control issues.
Yeah.
Because you're putting it out there, who knows what's going to happen?
Yes.
But it's a great thing. And in order to move forward, you have to take a risk.
Well, I'll tell you, I didn't realize how good it made me feel until I came to that part in your book. And all of a sudden I thought, that's what this feels like. That's why I have this charged feeling inside, because I'm taking a risk. I just hadn't recognized it as that. So
that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
That's wonderful. You make it all worthwhile.
Good. Thank you. Now, you talk, one of the things you talk in your book is about how hard it is, and this kind of ties in, to change a person's mindset about something. That if a contestant, the example you use in the book is that if a contestant goes into the interview process with the expectation that she's going to flub everything up and it's going to be so negative, well, it will be. And if she goes in to the interview process with the idea that, the judges will hate me, nobody's going to like me or something, that you kind of set up that energy. So how do you change that?
Well, you do it through, that's absolutely right. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And there are a lot of issues around that too. If you set your standards so high that they can't be met, if you'll only be happy, and this is some of the difficulty in coaching. If you get a woman who's extremely competitive, you don't want to take that away, because competition helps us perform at a higher level. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it can make people crazy, and that's where you hear all the stories about sabotage and girls being nasty to other girls and all the catty stuff that does happen because people lose their perspective. So I work a great deal with putting things into perspective. I think being grateful is a big part of that, and I've been emphasizing that lately. And I know that a few days ago, the previous Saturday, the present Mrs. Connecticut, who will be going to Mrs. America, stood on stage, and she said that I'm grateful for being here, having survived breast cancer, and being really happy. And I talked with her a long time about that. And she's very competitive, and she wanted to win, and she prepared, and she deserved to win. But it is what it is. It will move on, and life will move on. And how you behave, and you're being grateful. And she stood up there, and she said that outright. And she was. And that's perspective. So it's a matter of keeping things in perspective, in understanding that it's not everything, and to enjoy the process.
You mentioned something, I think it was in your book where I read it, about how was it? It's hard to be grumpy or depressed when you're grateful for something. And
it's true.
I think that's very true.
It's true.
Very true.
I ran 10Ks and my legs objected. I ran 5Ks and now I don't run at all. I exercise, and there will come a time when maybe I won't do that. Well, I'll walk. But then I'll look at somebody in the nursing home who can't do that, and I will say to myself, well, you're lucky to be able to do what you can do.
Yes.
We're all gifted.
I think, too, that it takes, every time some part of what we can do is diminished, it takes courage to take that one more step. Charlie, I know that you used to, and I don't know how long ago, but you used to teach a course called Exploring Your Creativity. And you said one of the characteristics of creative people is their ability to notice the common things that most of us take for granted. So I want you to talk with us about how that characteristic is evident in writers, and do you think creativity can be taught?
Well, in answer to the latter, creativity can definitely be taught. It goes back to what you were just talking about, which is reframing. All right, it's learning how to think about things. And in relation to that, how to be in the moment, how to be mindful, how to be conscious of what's happening in the moment. See, a lot of us carry, and this is true of pageants too, we're either thinking about history, oh, I failed. I call it the judge. We carry a judge with us, even though there's no evidence. We've got a judge reaching a conclusion. So we either base things in the moment on what happened, or in the case of public speaking, or going on stage or going into an interview, all the bad things that can happen. Oh my gosh, this will happen, that will happen. Well, number one, they won't happen. And number two, if they do, you deal with it, and you get over it, and you move on. And it's never, ever, ever as bad as your mind makes it out to be.
That's right.
So yes, creativity can certainly be taught. It's a way of framing, it's a way of thinking about things, and it's a way of association. I work a lot with that. We're making associations. Back to interview. What's interview? It's like sitting across the table from your best friend and speaking. You don't have to think about every word that you say. You don't have to choose every thought and have it down on paper. You just speak, because one thing leads to another. It's a domino effect.
You know,
Make sense?
Charlie, it does. It makes a lot of sense. And I have to say, I'm going to have you back another time, and we'll talk about the making of the book itself. But there was a lot here tonight because we had a wonderful conversation, and I thank you very much for being here to share all this with me and with the viewers. So I also want to thank my crew tonight, and I love to close this show with the words of the fantasy writer Ursula Le Guin, who said, and I think there's a great tie-in with Charlie's philosophy here, and that is, there have been civilizations that did not use the wheel, but there have been no civilizations that did not tell stories. So find your story and find a way to tell it. And do join us again next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Zita.
Food for the crew and guests was provided by Manchester Grill of Manchester, Connecticut, and Angelo's Restaurant of Glastonbury, Connecticut. Be sure to send your writing questions and your comments on the book club selection to Zita at Page 1, P.O. Box 1515, Manchester, Connecticut, 06045-1515, or send an email to Zita at page1tv.com.